2026 is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, of the birth of the United States of America. Revolution Untold uncovers the overlooked stories of the cradle of democracy, of the people that shaped a nation in Williamsburg, Virginia. The past is not complete until all its voices are heard. This is Revolution Untold.
Matthew Ashby was born free on July 18, 1765, to John and Sarah Ashby. A few months later, he was baptized at Bruton Parish, at the time an Anglican church tied to the British monarch. The American Revolution encapsulated Matthew's childhood. He was born just as the first Stamp Act was passed, and he came of age not long after the Treaty of Paris was signed. During this time, Williamsburg was the capital of Virginia, and on the eve of war, its population was over 50% African American, the majority of whom were enslaved. The Ashbys were one of the few free African American families living in Williamsburg and its surrounding area in the 18th century. The first 8 or so years of his life, Matthew lived with his parents and siblings. Until at least 1773, Matthew's family rented property on the Crawley Estate, which was located just outside of Williamsburg. Matthew's uncle and cousins are well known to Williamsburg history. Likely Matthew's namesake, Matthew Ashby the Elder, purchased and freed his wife and children in 1769. From limited records, historians have been able to determine that Matthew's cousins, Harry, John, and Mary, attended the Williamsburg Brace School in their childhoods. Between 1760 and 1774, the Brace School taught hundreds of Williamsburg's enslaved and free black children to read the Bible with the singular goal of justifying the institution of slavery. Beyond who his family was and where they lived, not much else is known about Matthew's earliest years. We do know, however, the significant events that impacted his community and would have likely touched Matthew's life in some way. In early America, even if the news first came by print, it quickly spread by word of mouth. When Matthew was 10 years old, he would have heard about the opportunity that Lord Dunmore's proclamation offered the enslaved in Virginia. Issued on November 7, 1775, this proclamation gave enslaved men a path to freedom so as long as they made it to British lines and took up arms on behalf of the Crown. Matthew may have noticed how Dunmore's offer increased tensions and suspicions across town. The next year, on July 19th, a day after Matthew's 11th birthday, the Virginia Gazette published the news of the Declaration of Independence. Whether he read the words himself or heard them whispered around town, we can't help but wonder what he thought about words like independence, freedom, and equality, especially when all around him these ideals were being withheld from those who looked like him. Amongst the turmoil of the Revolution, the Ashby family experienced significant loss and change of their own. Sometime in 1776, Matthew's father died. Now a widowed mother with several young children, Sarah Ashby turned to the church for help. Rather than allow Sarah's household to depend on the church's charity, on October 21st, the overseers of Bruton Parish directed her to bind Matthew and his siblings out to other households. These arrangements were known as pauper apprenticeships. In exchange for the child's labor, those who took bound children into their households were expected to provide food, clothing, and shelter. They were also expected to sometimes provide skills or education so that once those children reached adulthood, they would become productive members of their communities. While this was a common practice in early America for Matthew's family, it might have felt like a step backwards. 1777 was a transformational year for Matthew and the country. While Matthew began his time indentured to another household, the Continental Army won major battles against the British at Saratoga, securing the future French support that was crucial for America's success. Over the course of 1778 and 1779, more battles and allies were won by the Americans. No doubt thinking about his own future in this new nation, Matthew appeared before the York County Court on February 15, 1779, and signed a formal apprenticeship contract with shoemaker John Cole. Now 13, Matthew's contract ensured that in addition to learning the trade of shoemaker, he would be taught to read and write. This agreement between Matthew and John was standard for the time. It was meant to ensure that Matthew, like all apprentices, would enter adulthood with a specialized skill that could earn a stable income and keep them off the church's poor relief. Matthew's apprenticeship lasted for just over 7 years, ending on his 21st birthday in 1786. He came of age and grew into his legal independence just as the country did. When we think back about those who lived through the American Revolution, we don't picture boys like Matthew. Instead, we typically envision adults. And yet, children, boys and girls, lived through this revolutionary era as well. They felt the fear of the unknown, the frustration of injustice. They suffered and grieved the losses of their loved ones and their communities. But they also met the challenges of the moment. They exercised their voices alongside adults in protests and boycotts. They fought in the Continental Army as soldiers. They took on the work that was left behind by those who went off to war. And most importantly, they represented the future of America as citizens instead of subjects. It would be them, the children of this revolutionary moment, that would be tasked with fulfilling the potential of a new country born out of the promises of independence, freedom, and equality. And yet, we know that for many, the promises of the Declaration of Independence began as only half-truths, and it would take centuries before its promises would be truly fulfilled.
By sharing these stories, we remember more fully, understand more clearly, and expand the story of the American Revolution. Revolution Untold is generously supported by the Williamsburg 250 Commission, William and Mary Strategic Cultural Partnerships, and the Society of 1918 at William and Mary, and is made possible in part by a grant from VA 250 Commission in partnership with Virginia Humanities.